Are we getting back to normal, or are we not?
Well, I think it's beyond the White House. I think all of us are desperately searching for some signs of reassurance. I mean, the fact that there was such joy at the news, which turned out, unfortunately, to be false, that they found 5 firefighters. When you look at what that news would have been had it been true, 5 lives saved, 5,000?
Yeah.
I was thinking that maybe reassurance isn't really what we need now. I was thinking of Winston Churchill, who we all know as the man who rallied Great Britain in its worst hour, and he once went on the radio and said to his people, "The news from France is very bad." And I think what he was saying was, I'm going to level with you and tell you the seriousness of the situation so that you will know when I ask of you to be brave and to do this, you will know that I'm telling you the truth. And I think if you look at what happened, not just Tuesday, a little more than 60 hours ago.
Yeah, a little bit.
But the fact that the stock markets have been closed since longer than in the Depression. We have, that we've evacuated the House and Senate. We need to face head-on how rough this is.
The problem in part is, I don't want to suggest this is the problem, is that every time we say something, do something that says this is really big, really bad, really awful, we are in a sense saying they won.
Well, when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor and took out the Pacific Fleet, they won a battle. They knocked the United States flat on its back for a while. The important message then and now is to know that eventually this will not be permitted to stand. But they have, I said earlier tonight that I think it's really way past time we stop talking about this as a senseless act. From the perspective of the folks who did this, evil, yeah, monstrous, yeah, senseless, no. It was exactly what they wanted to do. And part of, I think, what a great nation has to do is to assess the fact that we have been hit in a way we have never been hit in our history. Because that's when you begin to measure what has to be done.
So we accept this horrible reality, which is not, in fact, it seems to me something in modern political times we do very comfortably. We don't, political leaders, at least not in the last 20 years or so, have not been much willing to say it's really bad.
Yeah, they haven't had to. I mean, except for Oklahoma City, which was a 100. Part of what's gone on here is that a lot of, I think, the crises, when we talk about crises, they have been
Moments.
Not real.
Yeah.
Even the Gulf War, which could have put many, many American service people at risk, turned out to be a walkover. And so we've had it very easy. I said to you 2 days ago on the roof, this may have been the day that America's luck ran out. That's something that we haven't had much experience facing. And we're telling each other everything is going to be different now. But I think it begins with a really honest assessment of what has happened. And what has happened, it's not something you can say, well, yes, we took a blow. This was something that's going to require something we have not asked of this country, literally, in 6 decades.
It's a very sobering way to look at this. Yeah.
But
I'm not suggesting for a moment it's not the right way to look at it. It is just a kind of reality that I think we resist.
Well, of course we do, and that's why we look for reassurance in the possible story of people being saved and the good works that people are doing. But if we're if we're serious as a country about what has to be done, it begins by measuring what has happened. And a friend of mine who I saw yesterday said, I was looking for you for reassurance. And I said, well, I'll be glad to provide some. Eventually this country's gonna prevail, but
not tomorrow. Thanks, Jeff. Senior analyst Jeff Greenfield joins us for a bit. We're about 4 minutes past 11 o'clock Eastern Time. Some of you may be tuning in, and we want to update you on where we have been and where we're headed now. Here are some of the latest developments this evening. Sources say at least 8 people are arrested at New York's Kennedy and LaGuardia airports. 4 of them were challenged at the gates or at the counters of one of the airports on the day of the hijackings. The suspects are in custody for, among other things, carrying false documents, including one man who was posing as a pilot. Officials trying to see if or how they might be connected to the tragedies of Tuesday. The president says the Pentagon says the president is considering activating reserve troops to relieve National Guard troops that have been patrolling U.S. airspace since Tuesday's terrorist attack. And in Manhattan, a city armory near Gramercy Park, is converted into a center for those who have been waiting for word on their loved ones. It is one of those places that will break your heart. Mayor Giuliani urges residents to have patience, with hundreds of New Yorkers pitching in as volunteers to help find the missing. And in a rare show of unity in Congress, the Congress has moved towards passing a $40 billion bill for recovery efforts and to combat terrorism in the country, and that is just a down payment, just a beginning. Search and rescue crews continue their search for survivors. Grieving relatives are pleading for information about their loved ones, and CNN's Maria Hinojosa has their story now.
Just 7 weeks ago, Ann McGovern posed with her new grandson minutes after he was born.
I've never seen her look so happy as when he was born. She was there. She was so excited.
But now her daughter Terry wants that smiling picture on television. Her mother worked on one of the top floors of the World Trade Center. Her daughter wonders if anyone has seen her alive.
We were interviewed by police detectives, and we had filled out a questionnaire, and it was really like, what jewelry would she have been wearing? Do you know what she had on? Did she have any identifying body marks?
Her sister Liz worked in the World Financial Center across the street, but managed to escape. She was supposed to meet her mother that day for lunch.
I was just about to call her, and I can't believe it. I don't think it's set in yet. I just feel so powerless, and I wish I could have done something.
That same awful feeling consumed an emergency center on Lexington Avenue, where authorities are compiling a list of the missing. It's become a place of public grieving and a place to hope for miracles.
He was on 104th floor, Cannon Fitzgerald. We've gone to hospitals, we've called every hotline. They don't know where we can't find him, he's not on any list. So.
Hope is the word, the emotion that keeps these people going. But that hope hits hard against the reality that thousands of body bags have already arrived into New York City.
Triage centers remain relatively quiet. The one at Stuyvesant
At a center for Mexican immigrants, 15 friends are confirmed dead so far. Radios are kept on in hopes there'll be word of hundreds of others, immigrants from Mexico who labored in the Twin Towers, hoping to make a better life.
In my heart, I feel that I'm crying.
But there is not much concrete news for these people today, just fears for the worst.
My mother was so excited that my son was born. She was there at the birth 7 weeks ago, and he's not going to know her.
And so there's resignation. Maria Hinojosa, CNN, New York.
When we began this program an hour or so ago, we began with a report from correspondent Gary Tuchman down at Ground Zero, and he had some extraordinary pictures of Ground Zero. Really, some of the most dramatic pictures of the area we've seen. Gary is now back with us and has the engineer who shot those pictures, which will allow us to find out more about what the engineer saw and allow you to see those pictures again. Gary?
Well, that's right. The engineer's name is Rob Matthews. He's actually an urban planner. That's his day job. But for the first couple of days of this rescue and recovery operation, he went out to help volunteer. And he had a camera with him. And today he took his camera and he took pictures that offer a perspective that you haven't seen before tonight. Rob, what we're going to do is we're going to start rolling the pictures right now. We're going to give you a look at the pictures. You can tell us about what you shot. But you were actually in a building next to the World Trade Center, which is called the World Financial Center Complex. And tell us what we're looking at right now.
Inside now we're looking at the 22nd floor on the east facade of number 2 World Financial Center.
Now this is right across the street from the World Trade Center. This was a building that the plane did not crash into, but this is the damage you see.
Exactly. This was the shock wave that burst through the windows, blew the debris inside, and this is a view down directly into the hold, directly into Ground Zero from the 22nd floor of the World Financial Center.
Now we've had some pictures from the ground, but the news media is not given the access that a guy like you who volunteered has gotten, and that's why it's the first time we've seen that shot from the top, and it really shows you just how huge that hole is. But I'm very surprised at all the damage inside this building across the street from the World Trade Center.
Well, the whole eastern facade of this building was blown off, the glass at least, and from the shockwave. And there's a piece of World Financial Center number 1, the American Express building, as tower number 1 toppled over. It took out a little piece of the southeast corner.
And that's one thing we want to say, that American Express building is one of the buildings they're fearful could possibly come down. Thank you very much for joining us, Rob. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
The search continues tonight, but they expect rain to come down, and that could be a major problem as they continue to look for victims. Back to you, Eric.
Gary, thank you. No matter how many times we see those pictures, they remain extraordinary. We want to try something here. We'll see if this works. So many events, virtually all events, public gatherings, large group gatherings have been canceled since Tuesday. Football games won't go on. In Los Angeles, Hollywood Bowl tonight, a Wynton Marsalis concert is going on. And if our timing is right, we will listen in at just the right moment. Bear with us for a moment. We're going to get there. Again, this is a Wynton Marsalis concert at the Hollywood Bowl outside in Los Angeles. We don't know how many people. Something we used to know. We don't know how many people are at the Hollywood Bowl tonight. We imagine that it was quite an emotional gathering when people arrived there. People have been glued to their TVs, haven't gotten out much. Marsalis moment, and a moment for the people who are there. A portion of the proceeds of the concert tonight will go to the American Red Cross. That was nice, wasn't it?
I want to tell you how appropriate it was for us to play that anthem.
Wouldn't argue with that one bit. Back to the other side of all of this. There have been so many lives lost. There are an estimated, I think 4,700 some still missing here in New York. So many stories. CNN's Peter Viles has the story of one New York company's devastating loss.
It is the saddest vigil you can imagine. Scott Hazelcorn's parents.
It's not even revenge. I mean, I just want to hear my son's voice.
Members of Junku Kang's church.
We all pray every night.
John Perconti's wife, expecting their child in December.
He called me at 10 to 9 and said, our building has just been hit by a plane, turn on the news. And I changed the channel and I saw what happened. And I said, oh God, John, please get out of there safely. And he said, I love you, I have to go.
What links these stories is that all the missing worked at Cantor Fitzgerald, all above the 100th floor of the North Tower, the first one hit. Cantor is not a glamorous firm, but it is crucial, one of the world's largest bond trading firms. 1,000 people worked up there. Fewer than 300 are accounted for, but it is not clear any of those now safe were on the top floors Tuesday morning.
I don't think anybody got out at this point, but we pray for miracles.
Scott Hazelcorn's parents suspect that their son did not run for his life.
He didn't care about himself. He only cared about his friends.
If Scott was there and he was getting out, he'd probably help everybody up in front of him. That's the kind of kid he was.
They gather at a city-designated center for relatives of the missing on 26th Street, where trees have become pleas for help. And further uptown at the Pierre Hotel, a gathering site for Cantor Fitzgerald families.
I don't think the company has the information that we need. I think they're sharing everything they know, but we have not heard of one survivor. We've not been able to validate any stories that we've heard.
There are official clearinghouses for information on the missing, and Cantor Fitzgerald is using them, but these friends and family members are convinced that any extra effort they can make on behalf of their loved ones is worth making. Peter Weil, CNN Financial News, New York.
The risk of giving you emotional whiplash here. There are also gestures going on in all parts of the country that will melt your heart. In this case, a show of sympathy from some who clearly are too young to even know what the word means. CNN's Kathy Slobogan with that.
Last night they said they ain't gonna move the buildings because they scared that they're gonna break some body bones.
Miss Connolly's 5th grade class is trying to make sense of a national tragedy.
A police officer had to get his leg amputated to get from under the rubble.
Like many schools across the country, Brown Street Academy in Milwaukee is letting its children ask questions and addressing their fears.
800 people did not die at the Pentagon. Not even close.
But while the teachers encouraged their children to talk, these 5th graders had something else in mind, something bigger.
I had 2 5th graders to come to my office, and they knocked on my door and said, Mrs. Robinson, we would like to come in and talk with you. Well, at the time, I was holding a meeting, so I said, sure, come in. And they looked over at me and they said, Mrs. Robinson, we're hearing about this, but we're sitting here, we're doing nothing. What are we going to do? There's something that we can do.
Principal Linda Robinson was surprised by what she heard.
Looks good. I like that. Let's work together.
90% of the children here come from low-income families. But these children felt there were people who needed money more than they did. People who needed their help.
This old man came rolling home. They said to me, Mrs. Robinson, every person at least has pennies. We can at least give pennies. And we want to make it a drive where we can at least donate something to them.
Led by the 5th graders, the children of Brown Street Academy are holding a penny and clothing drive to help the victims of the plane crashes. They also came up with the idea of asking the Salvation Army to help them distribute what they collect. Linda Robinson says the drive has galvanized the school.
Students were coming off the bus. Miss Robinson, I have my pennies. Do you have yours? They were so energetic. I saw students getting off and they had their hands up and they were saying, we make a difference.
The children's idea has turned grief into pride.
It's changed conversations on the playground. Even in the hallways, conversations have changed. Students are now talking about what's happening in the news. They are reacting positively to this tragedy.
Brown Street Academy, one small ray of light in a dark time. Kathy Slobogan, CNN.
Sweet. We saw firsthand late last night how people are reacting to the people here in New York who are trying to find the victims of the tragedy. Some firefighters walked into a restaurant we were in, and people, well, let me put it this way. I guarantee you that they bought no drinks for themselves. People were very generous. They cheered them. It's the kind of thing that's happening all over this city, is people see better than ever than they ever have before, I guess, those people who risk their lives to keep the city safe. Here's CNN's Richard Blystone.
These are the guys who run up the fire escape when everybody else is running down. The men who will get you out of an inferno 50 stories in the air or die trying. 30 men from this Midtown Manhattan firehouse may have died trying. They were among the first to reach the trade towers Tuesday, and they haven't come back.
So as you can see, the neighborhoods had an outpouring of love for us.
Night and day they come to leave a flower, light a candle.
I felt I did something, yes. I felt like I did something.
Hard-boiled New Yorkers.
When I was sitting out on somebody's car over there in disbelief, I had my head in my hands, and I felt somebody just kind of give a little squeeze on my arm. I look up, and it was just somebody walking past.
Total strangers, like this woman from Argentina, who says she had to come and touch the firemen. They're heroes, she says. They gave their lives, poor things, to save other people. These students from Montreal were here on a night on the town early Tuesday.
We happened to walk by, they're smiling. We said, hey, how's it going? Nice to meet you. We got on the truck, we took pictures, everybody was happy. And now we hear that some of the people who we met might be missing.
They were the first ones to go. It's just devastating. It's like, I can't believe we were here like 6 hours before this with those people.
You don't think much about firemen until you need them. But people are making up for that today, not waiting for a memorial to be built. They've created one outside the firehouse, more vibrant and more moving than anything a sculptor could carve out of stone.
Their courage and fearlessness just sets an example for the world. It's very, very powerful. And I'm honored. I'm honored to know they're just down the street from me.
If your friends are missing, it's a hard wait. A small distraction, in the words of support, the presence of food and flowers, and this present from Parsippany, New Jersey, to replace one of the station's 5 lost trucks.
Whatever you need it for, you got it. We just bought a new one. This is up for sale. You guys want it, you're more than welcome to it. We're still in business. Guys are going out. That's what we have to do. Protect the people, the city.
And so, those lucky enough to have done more than wait go home for a rest. Because it's not over. And it would be nice to think that in times to come, when the memories come flooding back, they will remember these as well. Richard Blystone, CNN, New York.
Well, Frank Donahue of the Red Cross is with us. I don't think he's surprised by the generosity that he's seen here in your own way, in the generosity business, I think. Just quickly, to show...
I'm showing Aaron a sandwich.
Tell the story here.
First graders from Long Island made hundreds of these for the people at the Armory today, for the workers. They had little notes on it and a Hershey Kiss. I have to admit I ate the Hershey Kiss on the way over, but it's a sign, I think, of what so many people in the generosity, people, restaurants, everywhere, every shelter, every facility that we have going.
They made thousands of them, and being first graders, what kind of sandwich is it?
Peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah, PB&J. Let's talk about what people are going through. You didn't have to be in the ground zero area to be horribly affected by what happened there. You didn't need to lose a loved one. You just had to see the pictures.
Absolutely. The pictures are staggering. When I came over Tuesday over the Holland Tunnel, came into Holland Tunnel and saw New York, I'm reminded of 2 years ago when I was in Izmit, Turkey, and 20,000 people lost their life in that earthquake. The black cloud that hung over Turkey was the same cloud that was hanging over New York, and it's still there, the smoke. And everywhere I've turned, the emotion of people, the signs on trees and on telephone poles of loved ones missing, it's everywhere, this whole city.
One of the things that occurred to me this afternoon, I was talking to someone who had survived it, and I'd been in Oklahoma City a year after the bombing there, and people who survived these things, in this case people who got out of the World Trade Center before they collapsed, go through a kind of post-traumatic stress where they, in fact, feel guilty for having lived.
Right. We have about 500 volunteer mental health workers, many of them at the Armory, in a variety of locations in the city, that are helping people deal just with that, the guilt that I got out and my best friend didn't. And also, of course, the pain of family members that are looking to find people and are hearing nothing. There's not much to tell people at this point.
And just to stay with the survivors for a second, these things manifest itself in horrible ways, in divorce, in depression. In Oklahoma City, at least, there were a number of suicides and suicide attempts. So it's hugely important for these people to get the kind of counseling and more, because you guys do triage counseling, really, right?
Right, correct, yeah.
I mean, get them early before something...
And then we try to push them into going to something more long-term, dealing with their clergyman or whoever, so that people don't continue to deal with this. As I was talking to some mental health people today, we have a city that's stunned. Many of the people that you saw around the Armory, around the whole city block in lines, are stunned. But after that stage comes a stage of anger. And that will be another stage. I'm glad Mayor Pataki has asked all of us to be patient, because I think that's something we all need to keep in mind.
On that subject of anger, I got to tell you that I thought today that, at least where the places I was, the city started to shift from shock to anger. I heard more people say angry things. We got to get these guys. We got to do this. But I mean, I think people have had it. They've had it with the threats. They've had it with the disaster. They have had it.
And I think it's such an important opportunity for all of us to send a different message to young people and to kids like this, that it's an opportunity for us as a country to come together. One of the things I've been saying to a number of people is, why a city like New York or on the East Coast do we ever have a blood shortage? The gift of life, why is that? It should be rare in this country. It's the most populated part of the nation, and it's the one with the greatest blood shortage in the nation. This should be a testimony to these people that lost their life, that we'll never let a blood shortage ever happen in this country again. That we will always try, at least, to give and to go the extra mile. And I think, hopefully, out of this tragedy, some good can come, and I hope that that's the kind of thing we can learn.
This is a couple of other areas here quickly. That whole question of how we talk about this to our kids is, I suspect, troubling to every one of us who has a child, in my case a 12-year-old, who yet again sees a shattering moment in her life and tries to make sense of it. And how do you do that?
Mm-hmm. The Red Cross, we have a lot of disaster preparation programs. We're actually in schools every day teaching little kids how to deal with disasters. And you'd be surprised, sometimes little children are a lot easier, a lot more able to deal with it because of the training and the things that we were already teaching them how to deal with. We have a number of programs now for children. We have coloring books and materials available. People should contact their local Red Cross, because you don't have to be in New York to talk to your child about what they saw or seeing every day on the television. It's an opportunity to sit down with your children, tell them some of these things, and there's tools available to you to do that.
I mean, it's a terribly difficult and complicated thing, and I don't want to wax on here, but you know, these kids have seen the horror of Columbine on television, and they've seen now this on television, and they see these things repeated over and over again, and they begin to think that they live in a truly evil world.
It's certainly expanding. The evil that we've seen in many faraway places has expanded. I was so touched yesterday, my cell phone rang. 2 kids that I know, I do a lot of work in Bosnia with the Red Cross. 2 kids from Bosnia called me to see if I was all right. I thought it's an amazing thing that 2 college students were calling here to see if friends in America were okay.
How long do you think that you'll have this sort of major operation in play?
Months. Months. This operation is just beginning, and all the folks that even live in the whole Wall Street area, Battery Park area, finding housing for those folks, all of these things. We'll be at this for a long time.
And when we, on Tuesday, we were talking about a critical shortage of blood. You mentioned there's almost an ongoing shortage of blood in an area like this. Some of that has to do with people's fears about giving blood, which they needn't fear, by the way. Do you still need it?
Blood is always needed. As fewer survivors are pulled from the building, you know, the blood need that was thought immediately isn't as great. But the Red Cross has blood on standby, ready to go. We continue to want people to always give the gift of life, and they should dial that 1-800-GIVE-LIFE and be ready when we do need it, that you're ready to do it.
But tell me if I heard this right, okay? What I think you just said is that maybe in terms of dealing with this moment, this crisis, the blood issue, the blood shortage issue, isn't what we thought it might be on Tuesday. Not suggesting people don't go out and do...
Correct.
Yeah.
I think that people are saying, you know, as the bloodlines are endless. All over the country, the phones are ringing off the hook. People want to give blood. Because there's so many people have not been pulled from the wreckage that need blood. The demand hasn't been as great as initially thought, as we see on the television with all the doctors being released from hospitals that weren't needed. Mm-hmm. That's the unfortunate news.
Yeah. And you think you'll be going for months. Do the demands change day to day or week to week? Do you start to deal with different sets of problems?
Absolutely. I mean, we'll be looking at long-term recovery for people that have been displaced from the whole Wall Street neighborhood, for sheltering operations, emotional support for families, and, you know, all the complications that are involved in missing people. Missing people is something the Red Cross deals with in war-torn countries and now in America, and it's quite a long process.
We're not embarrassed at all or uncomfortable saying we appreciate your efforts, your good work. We know how tired you must be, how hard all of the volunteers must be for the work they've done. We appreciate it very
I'm very
much.
proud of what they're doing. They're great people.
Well, you should be. Thanks for coming in tonight. That's probably
Thank
the
you.
last thing you need to do is come in and talk to us.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Donahue, Frank Donahue with the American Red Cross. Thank you. We, as a country, we are in the midst of finding what psychologists call a new normal. And one of the ways to do that, one of the signs of that at least, was that airports did open. It was kind of sporadic. But CNN correspondent James Sartori did get on a flight today, and here is his report of that first time in the sky.
The fifth busiest airport in the U.S. didn't look so busy Thursday morning as the nation's airlines struggled to regain their wings. One reason, no more curbside check-in. Bags must go to the counter. So now the crowds are inside. That's where I was, trying to get on a flight to Salt Lake City, Utah.
It's about 2 hours before our plane takes off, and the line of passengers here is about as long as a football field. We're not even sure the plane's going to be taking off. I did see a crew starting to go through the gate. That's encouraging.
I'm not going to believe we're going until I'm on the flight and we take off the runway.
The FAA now requires airlines to scrutinize passengers more carefully. Some changes are apparent. One new question, do you have any sharp objects like knives or scissors?
They took my scissors away.
At the check-in?
I guess my scissors was too pointy at the top.
In addition to ID checks, some bags apparently picked at random are hand-searched, and only ticketed passengers allowed into the gate area. Less obvious changes, all aircraft must now be thoroughly checked for explosives before they're put into service for the day. The airlines are no longer permitted to carry cargo or mail within the continental U.S., except for the U.S. military. But with the tragedy in New York City still unfolding, no one seems to mind the delays and a little hassle.
You keep remembering so many people have it so much worse. I mean, this is nothing. You know, if you don't get out today, I don't get out today. At least I'm here and not there. So.
Some say Americans haven't paid enough attention to airline security.
We want things very convenient. We're a convenience-oriented people, and you can't have secure convenience.
Finally, after 3 hours to check in, we're off. Delta Flight 2027, a short 80-minute hop, which surprisingly is nearly empty, just 25 passengers. I wonder how many were left at the airport, still in line.
All in all, our short trip was uneventful. A little longer, a few more questions than normal, but for a while at least, nothing about U.S. air travel will be normal. James Sartori, CNN, Salt Lake City, Utah.
Obviously, just one quick point to make on that. Things move, when they move today, a little more quickly than they're going to move. When you get thousands of people and air traffic gets back to its normal levels, that's when things are really going to get a little sticky, and so, or a lot sticky. One airline official told us the other day that 2 hours is not an unreasonable time to give yourself to get to the airport, and don't even think you can make the flight by running through the airport 15, 20 minutes beforehand. About half past the hour, 11:32 now. Quick look at where we've been and where we are headed here on this special report tonight. CNN has learned at least 8 people were arrested at New York's LaGuardia and John F. Kennedy airports amid concerns over a threat of yet another hijacking. 4 of them had been challenged at one of the airports on Tuesday morning, came back to JFK tonight and were taken into custody. They are being held for carrying fake documents. At the Pentagon, new flames late tonight coming from the wreckage of the plane crash there on Tuesday as crews continued to search for 126 people still believed missing in the rubble at the Pentagon. That fire still burns. It had been quiet there. And in New York, hundreds of family and friends of those missing from the World Trade Center are lined up at the city armory in a scene that will break your heart. They are waiting to register their loved ones on a missings list, clinging to pictures, desperately hoping someone will have some information, some word on the whereabouts of their missing friend or husband or boyfriend, girlfriend, what have you. The armory staying open 24 hours a day. Quick update of where we've been. Search efforts have uncovered the flight data recorder now for the hijacked airliner that crashed in western Pennsylvania, about 80 miles outside of Pittsburgh on Tuesday. CNN's David Mattingly is standing by, Somerset County, Pennsylvania, with more on that. David, what can you tell us?
Aaron, this slow and meticulous crash investigation took a big step forward today with the discovery of the flight data recorder. According to the FBI, the device was discovered inside the impact crater. That's the large blackened pit that was created when Flight 93 crashed here Tuesday morning. The device now destined for Washington, D.C. for further examination. The flight data recorder is important because it will allow investigators to retrace the functions of the aircraft prior to the crash. Word of its discovery came after it was learned today that small charred pieces of wreckage are now turning up in towns here as far as 8 miles away from the crash site. More indications of just how powerful the force behind this crash and explosion truly was. The recovery of the flight data recorder raises hopes here at the crash site of a quick recovery of the next important piece of evidence, the cockpit voice recorder. That device could tell us what was happening with the people on the aircraft, what was happening after those heart-wrenching phone calls from passengers aware of what the terrorists were planning to do, saying that they were planning to fight back, to challenge the 4 hijackers who had taken their airplane. A heroic scenario that could explain why the plane crashed here instead of continuing on to Washington, D.C. and to targets like the White House, the Capitol building, or maybe even Air Force One. For now, the search continues and will begin anew in the morning, as well as the painful process of recovering and identifying the remains of the 45 people who were on board. Aaron?
Any idea? Well, I have a couple things actually. Any idea when we will hear what is on that flight data recorder? I know they have it. I suspect it's not going to be tomorrow. Do you have any feel for that?
The FBI is running this investigation here as a crime scene, and they're strictly by the book. They are not speculating about anything. So no word on how long it might be before we get any kind of information back. The NTSB will be here tomorrow, and they might be able to answer those questions for us.
And you know, one of the great mysteries here is where that plane was in fact headed. Anything new on that? Have you picked up anything there on what the target might have been?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
The focus has been entirely on what's going on here, and there's been a great deal of determination and resolve to stay concentrated on the task at hand. And it is a daunting task because it is a very large area, and there are very, very small pieces of wreckage that they have to try and locate.
David, thank you. I apologize there for blindsiding you. I didn't mean to do that. Thank you.
Not at all.
It's just one of those days where I haven't had a chance to talk to everybody tonight, and sometimes those things happen. We want to turn a corner here, take a look at how the United States might respond to what has happened, and perhaps how the United States should respond. Peter Bergen is a CNN terrorism analyst, and he joins us. Also, William Lures is with us as well to join in this conversation. Good evening to you. You have been patiently waiting in this hot room tonight. And Peter, I know you're there. And Mr. Lures, wait another minute for me. Let me start with Peter. Peter, if you had to bet here, what do you think the response, how massive the response are we going to see?
Well, let me say that I met with bin Laden in 1997 in Afghanistan, and if a military operation is being contemplated to take him out or snatch him in some way, that would be an operation that would encounter considerable resistance for the following reasons. Bin Laden, when I met with him, was surrounded by a group of at least a couple of dozen heavily armed men who are armed with RPGs and Russian submachine guns. They're highly motivated, they're prepared to die, and that was just in the course of just doing an interview. Obviously, bin Laden must be very concerned about his security right now, and he has hundreds of followers who might be surrounding him. Also, any American military operation in Afghanistan would be conducted in some of the most inhospitable terrain in the world. It's a rocky, mountainous, desert region. It's an area with which bin Laden is very familiar, and with which Americans aren't very familiar. The last time America had a presence in Afghanistan was in 1989. Since then, the embassy there has been closed. So the information the United States has about the country is second-hand and old. Aaron.
And so that kind of surgical mission, go in there and get him, if that's what we're talking about, would be very difficult to do. And in fact, the United States hadn't had a whole lot of success with that sort of operation.
Well, let's think about Somalia, where 18 American servicemen died in a very intense two-day firefight. We were trying to snatch or kill Mohammed Aidid, the clan leader there, if you remember, in 1993. That was an unmitigated disaster. This would be much tougher, I think, because A, there's no element of surprise. Bin Laden knows that we're coming after him, and B, it's a country in which in Somalia there were 28,000 American soldiers who had been there for several months, and this is not going to be the situation in Afghanistan. We're going to go in, we're going to not know much about this. If we do go in, we're not going to know much about the terrain, and we're going to be faced with people whose main mission in life is to die. I mean, these people want to die. They think they're instantly going to paradise, and they're very prepared to die for their leader.
Turn to Mr. Lourdes here. What's your fear? What's your worst fear in all this?
My fear is that we will come off to the world as trigger happy rather than intelligent, resolved, and determined to get this done. Let me just say, when the Second World War began, after Pearl Harbor, we first had to figure out how we're going to defend our country at home. Get our security in place. Then we had to build a capacity to do that, to take on the Japanese and the Germans. And we didn't have the capacity for either one. And it took time. That war took 4 years. And I would argue that this is so serious, and this is so long-term, that we need to develop the capacity, which is really anti-American, to deal with this type of challenge to our society. The airplane thing is only one small element of dealing with the threat of terrorism in our society. And then secondly, we have to begin to develop the type of intelligence capacity that will enable us to deal with the broad issue. It's not just Osama bin Laden. It's a huge problem.
But look, tell me if you think this is fair, that there are really two issues on the table tonight. There is the issue of who committed this atrocity. That's issue number one. And what are we going to do about that? And that plays to, it is connected to issue number two, which is the broader question of how does our nation, how do all nations, all civilized, responsible nations, however you want to put it, how do they deal with this broader problem of terrorism? But why do you think it's necessary to link them? Why not deal with one at a time?
Because this network is not just Osama bin Laden. It's a network that has penetrated our society, the Middle East, but Europe, and they're everywhere. And I don't believe for a minute that the thousands of people out there will be affected if we kill, if we're able to kill, and as you just heard, it's going to be very difficult to do that, Osama bin Laden. I mean, this isn't about revenge. This is about winning. And I think it's going to take a long time. It's not simply who did that. Many of the people who did it are now dead. They died in those aircraft. Who planned it? It's probably much more difficult to find that out. And I'm merely suggesting that as angry as this city is and this country is, and as ready as we are to be awakened to the fact that there's a world out there that we've got to understand better and deal with better, and that there's a world in here that we have to protect better, that we've got to take our time at doing that. This isn't about a trigger-happy America. This is about a determined, powerful, intelligent America.
We have to angry America.
We have to think better than this guy does and these people do, and we have to shoot better. And I think it's going to take us a while. And I, for one, am not anxious to drop bombs and shoot at people. I think we should root out these problems wherever they are in our society, build up our forces, and develop our intelligence capacity so that over the next, I think it'll take a couple of years to get this thing resolved. And we've got to be ready for that. This is a long struggle.
Just, Peter, quickly before you get away, I wonder, just in 20 seconds or so, if you agree with that what we're looking at, if the world is looking at eliminating terrorism, and I must admit, that sounds like a pretty tall task to me, if A, you think it's possible at all.
Well, if we're talking about, let's say, just eliminating Osama bin Laden, obviously that would have some effect on his network, which is clearly the main terrorist threat the United States faces, because he has a certain charismatic presence and he's regarded as a leader. But the inherent problems wouldn't go away. There's a set of people who are opposed to United States policies in the Middle East, and those people aren't going to magically change their views overnight if their leader is assassinated or magically dies of some mysterious illness. So I think I would agree largely this is a long-term thing. Eliminating him tomorrow would certainly solve some short-term problems, but it wouldn't be the end of the whole story.
Peter, thanks. Good to talk to you again. Mr. Lewis, nice to meet you. The UN Association, the chairman thereof. Appreciate your coming in and your patience today.
Thank you.
It's a very provocative way to look at this. It's probably healthy to get it on the table as well. It is particularly healthy, I think, given how many times in the last couple of days we have heard the word war thrown around. We are at war. This is a new war. This is the first war of the 21st century. This is World War III. We have heard all of that. But what is war? Here's CNN national correspondent Bruce Morton.
World War II brought Americans together. Most believed that Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan were evil and aggressive. Americans demanded victory. The phrase of the day was unconditional surrender. Korea and Vietnam, in contrast, divided the country. Vietnam, in particular, left Americans suspicious, leery of wars, and in the conflict since, the motto seems to have been, bomb all you want, but we can't stand American casualties. That seems different now. No yellow ribbons, bring the hostages home, please. Flags this time, half-staff but proud. People are lining up to give blood. The Red Cross 800 number logged 700,000 calls in the first 6 hours after an appeal went out. Some military recruitment officers see an increased interest. And the country seems prepared to send its young people into harm's way.
I think the United States is in a long twilight struggle against these forces of evil that have chosen to destroy us because we are good. And I believe that it may take a lot of time, a lot of American treasure, and perhaps some American blood.
Make no mistake about it, my resolve is steady and strong about winning this war that has been declared on America.
A goal of victory, not compromise. And later, wars change countries. World War II made the United States a world power committed to an international role. Isolationism left behind. Vietnam left the United States more cynical. Americans had learned their government could lie to them. This time, unity so far, agreement on a goal so far. Will that change if the struggle is long? We can't know. The fight is just beginning. Bruce Morton, CNN, Washington.
Former General Wesley Clark knows a thing or two about war, and you more than likely know a thing or two about him. You've seen him a lot, former NATO commander. He joins us from Atlanta tonight. Talk a little more about all of this. General Clark, good evening. Try it again, one more time, and then we'll figure out where we are. General Clark, are you able to hear me? Okay, we'll try and put the plugs together and figure that out and get back to General Clark if we can. Jonathan Aiken now has more on the comfort Americans are finding in their own flag.
They're sprouting like flowers, flying from houses, waving from cars, hung over highways, draped over walls. Anywhere you could put a flag, you're likely to find one.
How can you not? How can you not? Just to show support for our country, for the people, for the families that have lost people. And it's only by the grace of God we're not one of them.
You may be seeing a lot more. Congress wants flags flying coast to coast for the next 30 days.
It's right here.
People are wasting little time. At this flag shop in suburban Washington, business has been so brisk they can't take the money fast enough. Can't keep the waiting in line short enough.
Probably about a half an hour, but it's well worth the wait.
Which beats finding no flags at all. This Virginia Walmart is sold out and waiting for more.
We're hoping they have had to step up production of American flags.
No flag shortage in Los Angeles. You'll find one in every daily news. Children across the country have been busy too, marching in Minnesota or just drawing flags in San Francisco. Grown-ups are busy wearing flags on their heads, their chest, and figuratively at least, on their sleeves.
I feel very helpless because we're all the way in California and all these poor people in New York and Washington are hurting. And so I thought this would be a way to show that I'm a true American, I believe in the flag, I believe in freedom.
The Pledge of Allegiance is making a big comeback too.
I said the Pledge of Allegiance for the first time in a long time. You know, because I've kind of had the belief sometimes that there's not liberty and justice for all. And I said it today, and I was proud to do it.
Some people may think it's corny to fly the flag all the time. After all, there's Flag Day and Memorial Day and the 4th of July, and isn't that enough? Well, not today. Not anytime soon. Jonathan Aiken for CNN, Washington.
Well, we've seen a lot of flags in New York today, or maybe it is that we notice them more. Let's roll the dice one more time. General Wesley Clark is in Atlanta now. There you are. General Clark joins us. It's nice to talk to you again, sir. Help me with a couple of things. We were talking about how the United States might respond to this, and this always comes down, I guess it comes down two ways. Intelligence, one, but military, another. Is the military really set up to deal with this kind of enemy, or is the military designed to deal with countries, in a sense?
Well, we've got a lot of different capabilities in the military. Certainly we can deal with an enemy that's like this. But it won't be the kind of military operation that Americans envision. It won't be another, in all probability, it won't be another Gulf War. You're not going to see a massive deployment of troops. You're not going to have a big buildup that way. You're going to see a lot of diplomatic meetings. There'll be a lot of things going on underneath the surface. Occasionally people will be arrested. And if the work is done right, you may never see it until it's over and those who are responsible, that international terrorist network, is taken down and either brought in for justice or eliminated in some other way.
So you don't necessarily see the response. I suspect a lot of us have seen the response as some sort of, somebody's going to get bombed, okay? I mean, that's the first thing we're going to see. And what I hear you saying is maybe that not only isn't what's going to happen, but maybe that isn't what ought to happen.
You can't tell right now, Aaron. It's too early, because if there are appropriate targets and the cruise missiles or the bombing is the right weapons, then that's what we'll use. But it's only partly a matter of training facilities and headquarters. It's really a matter of people. And before we attack facilities, we've got to make sure that that's really productive. It may not be productive in this case, but it may. If it disrupts terrorist organizations, if it puts them on the run, if it makes it more difficult for them to plan another action against us, then that's what we should do. But the main work here is not against places. It's not against fixed facilities. It's against the network, the people, the leaders, supporters, those who are out in countries all around the world who are couriers and providing funds and information and casing out operations and planning things and reporting back in. There are cells and various headquarters probably in dozens of countries, and they all need to be taken down, and it mostly won't be done by bombing.
In dozens of countries?
That would be my appreciation of this, yes. It's a very broadly based network. And you may remember, if you go back over the incidents in the last decade, there were incidents that in the Philippines where people were apprehended before they could board an airliner. Probably there was support in the Philippines. There have been incidents elsewhere, and there are quiet support cells in countries where there have probably never been incidents. This is a very carefully prepared network. And it's going to be tough to take it down.
We may have talked about this the other afternoon, but one of the problems here, it seems to me, is there's kind of a pernicious cycle here that you go in and you respond to these things, and in doing so you are successful to whatever degree you are successful. But one of the things that seems to inevitably happen is people get angry for the response. People sympathize, and they end up they become martyrs. They get more sympathizers. There are more training camps, more terrorists, and more trouble.
Well, that's why operating inside an international coalition is so important. Now, yesterday and today, all kinds of leaders from around the world, including Mr. Arafat and many Arab leaders, have expressed their full support. They want to join this coalition. Good. The place to start is their work at home in their own countries. There are those who probably applauded this. There are some who sympathized with it even though they didn't express it. There may be other cells in those countries. These people are all part of the network that has to be taken down. So I hope that people will appreciate the work that's being done. The great work that's been done so far by the FBI here is just representative of the kind of work that's going to have to be done everywhere. And it won't look like, in all probability, it won't look like a Desert Storm. Now, if there are state sponsors to this, and the state sponsors determine that they want to take the heat, then it may take other types of action. But
let me ask you a quick question, see if I get a quick answer. I know that military guys worry about having political support here. As you look at this right now, obviously the country's enraged. Do you worry that the outrage will not last long enough for the planning, the intelligence, and the response to actually take place?
Well, I think we've got good political support right now, and what it appears is the guidance is there. There's a determination to take this fight the whole way, and then the political leaders and the people that care in this country will have to resolve to maintain their determination. It may take weeks, months, or longer to finish this fight.
General Clark, it's good to talk to you again.
Nice to talk to you. Thank you.
Always an interesting conversation. Former General Wesley Clark used to be the NATO commander and now is helping us sort through some of the events of the last few days. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
A couple of other things before we say goodnight tonight. Just as the skyline of New York has been altered, perhaps forever, so has the lifestyle of millions of New Yorkers who've seen their city change. Whether that change is permanent or temporary, we cannot now say. Here's CNN's Jeannie Mose.
New York is always noisy, but these days it's wailing. A city of sirens and face masks and evacuations, from Grand Central to Macy's to the building that houses CNN's New York Bureau.
Everybody back!
New Yorkers seem taken aback.
Why did you move back? Come on.
Shaken even by a false alarm, clinging to cell phones, talking about the latest rumor, the latest scare.
It's an uneasy feeling.
Uneasy having seen apocalyptic images of ashes raining down and later being brushed off like a blanket of dirty snow. Uneasy over the smell of smoke, depending on which way the wind blows. Uneasy at the sight of police checkpoints.
Where do you live?
Aimed at keeping folks out of lower Manhattan. Only now have those forced to evacuate.
She's a good girl. She's a scaredy cat.
Been allowed back into their apartments to retrieve their pets.
You got 5 minutes inside to gather up your dog, your cat, whatever it is.
Retrieved pets like Alexander have much in common with their owners.
He's just, a little insecure and scared, but he's fine.
Those helping with the search have become heroes, and authorities are having to turn away volunteers.
Actually, what's happened is too many guys, and it's starting to trip over each other. So
well-wishers are practically force-feeding rescuers. Flags have sprouted all over New York and all over New Yorkers. Some are out to make a buck.
Little ones are cute.
Hey, free flags, free flags, free flags. Andy, give this man one free. There we go. There you go. Give that little baby one, too.
These two sought peace of mind on rollerblades.
It's very surreal. Well, it's out of a bad sci-fi film, but every morning you wake up and you're like, it wasn't a dream, it wasn't a movie, it actually happened.
And some moviegoers are waiting in line, wearing masks. An outdoor cafe just isn't the same when you're obliged to cover your face instead of your lap. Jeannie Mose, CNN, New York.
And finally from us this evening, over the last couple of days, we have seen, all of us, the stunned reaction of people in New York and in Washington, many of whom have spoken about how helpless they feel in the face of this horrible tragedy. The feelings are much the same in small-town America tonight, as CNN's Candy Crowley reports.
Berryville, Virginia is an hour's drive from the Pentagon, far enough away not to have heard terrorism's roar, close enough to feel its pain.
I spent all day yesterday at the Pentagon working the fire.
A pretty terrible scene.
Yeah, it's about as unbelievable as TV doesn't do it any justice. It's horrible.
After 48 hours on call, D.C. firefighter Craig Hageman came home to Berryville and bought a couple of flags.
I believe in my country. I believe in everything we're about. And the more I support it, and the more everybody else support it, and it's just keeping the faith.
Berryville's the kind of place where the barber is a minister and the mayor and his mother run the flower shop. the kind of place where putting up flags was second nature. No meetings, no proposals. It just kind of happened.
They came out late on Tuesday, and just sort of a spontaneous thing from the town office. So we decided that we have these flags that we obviously put up for Memorial Day and Labor Day and 4th of July and special occasions like that, and just thought this was a good time to put them out, just to show some support.
They are everywhere now. They hang from the mirrors of Potter's barbershop.
Well, we all love a country. We have big pride in the country, and well, it's hard to tell you what patriotism is.